5.2 million vanished overnight. That was the first line my bank statement spoke to me that morning. Clean, cold, impossible. I refreshed the screen twice, then a third time. Still the same. $200,000. I stared at that number so long, it began to blur. Money doesn't just disappear. Someone moves it. And in our family company, only one person had the codes. My daughter-in-law, Lena. I remember my pulse thudding in my ears. The office around me was silent, except for the rain outside, tapping steady against the glass. The more I stared, the louder it felt, like the sound of something cracking inside me. She wouldn't dare, I whispered. Would she? I opened the transaction log. It showed a single transfer, late at night, after the system should have locked out. The destination account was blurred behind security encryption. Whoever moved it knew what they were doing. The same night, Lena's keycard had been used to access the office, 2:37 a.m. I leaned back in my chair, every memory of trust flashing in reverse. The dinners we shared, the holidays I paid for, the day I told my son, "She's the best thing that ever happened to you." And now, staring at those digital numbers, I wasn't so sure anymore. I tried calling her. No answer. Then again, voicemail. Outside, the storm built up, each drop against the window sounding like another question I couldn't ignore. Finally, I clicked open the security feed. Grainy footage, empty hallway. And then, her, Lena, walking quickly, phone pressed to her ear, a folder tucked under her arm. She looked nervous. Her eyes darted to the corners, like she didn't want to be seen. My breath caught. She stopped by the main vault office, typed something, and disappeared inside. 5 minutes later, she walked out. Same folder, but this time, heavier. And she didn't look back. I shut the laptop and sat there in the dark. The sound of the rain and my heartbeat became the same rhythm. I trusted her. I gave her everything. And now, even the numbers don't believe me. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it wasn't her. But that night, as the thunder rolled above the city, one thought refused to leave me. If it wasn't theft, then what was it? Stay with me, because what I found next turned every suspicion I had into something I never saw coming. People always say that money tests families. They're wrong. Money doesn't test you. It reveals you. And our family had plenty to reveal. My late husband, Richard, built Pierce Exports with his bare hands, an impossible charm. He used to say, "Margaret, one day this company will outlive us. So keep it clean. Keep it in the family." So I did. After he died, I ran the company like a soldier runs a fortress. Strict, precise, and painfully loyal. Control was my way of surviving grief. If I couldn't control my loss, I could at least control the books. Ethan, my only son, inherited his father's soft heart and none of my steel. He hates confrontation, avoids conflict, and believes everyone means well, even when they don't. He's kind, gentle, and utterly unfit for the world we built. Then came Lena, the woman who would eventually hold the passwords to everything. I still remember the first dinner she came to. She wore a navy dress, simple but graceful, and her smile, sweet, almost shy, made Ethan look 10 years younger. When she spoke, she didn't sound like anyone from our world. She didn't name-drop clients or mention quarterly profits. She talked about books, sunsets, and how she'd once wanted to be a teacher. I liked her for that. I really did. But part of me also thought, she'll never survive in this family. When they married, I wanted to be happy, truly. But within a year, my son insisted that Lena join the company. Said she had a degree in finance and could help. I told him I didn't believe in mixing love with ledgers. He told me, "Mom, trust her. So I did. I gave her access. Not to everything, but to enough. Enough to matter. Enough to hurt. At first, she seemed perfect, efficient, calm, polite. The staff adored her. Clients praised her charm. And Ethan kept telling me, "See, she's good for us." But in quiet moments, the kind of silence that follows when the dishwasher hums and the rain starts outside, I'd notice little things. The way she glanced at my desk when she thought I wasn't looking, how she'd take calls in another room, or how she'd end meetings just before I walked in, as if something needed hiding. I told myself I was overthinking. That's what women like me do when we have too much time and too many memories. Still, the feeling stayed. That thin thread of doubt that tightens a little more each day. We had a dinner last month, the last peaceful one, before the storm began. I cooked roast lamb, Ethan's favorite. The three of us sat around the table, pretending to be a family. Halfway through the meal, I brought up business. And just like that, the air turned cold. "Lena, I noticed the new account transfers," I said casually. "You didn't need to move funds without telling me." She looked at me, steady. "It was just internal reallocation. Ethan approved it." "Ethan," I said, turning to my son, "did you even read the forms before you signed them?" He sighed. "Mom, please." I smiled. That quiet, deadly smile women learn after 50 years of keeping the peace. "Of course, I forgot. You trust her." Lena set down her fork gently. "Margaret, I'm not your enemy." "Good," I said, "because I don't tolerate enemies at my table." She didn't reply, just folded her napkin and stared at the rain outside. Ethan's hand reached for hers under the table, and I realized something that made my heart twist. I wasn't just losing control of the company. I was losing my son. That night, I went to bed but couldn't sleep. The sound of the storm outside mixed with the sound of my husband's voice echoing from years ago. Keep it in the family. I used to think that meant trust no one outside. But what if the danger wasn't outside at all? I turned on the lamp, opened my laptop, and checked the business account again. The balance hadn't changed. No red flags, no errors. Just that eerie quiet you get right before a quake. The next morning, Lena greeted me with coffee and a calm smile. "Good morning, Margaret. I thought you liked the Brazilian roast." "I do," I said, taking the cup. "I also like honesty." Her eyes flickered. Not fear, not guilt, but something like pity, and that somehow felt worse. "You don't trust me, do you?" she asked softly. "Trust is earned," I replied. "Not assumed." She nodded, and I swear, for a split second, I saw a sadness in her that didn't belong to guilt. A sadness that looked like someone carrying a secret too heavy to speak. But pride doesn't listen to whispers. It only listens to proof. And proof was coming. Sometimes I wonder if suspicion is a curse passed down through bloodlines. My mother was the same. She used to say, "If you expect betrayal, you'll never be disappointed." I built an empire on that advice. And maybe that's the problem, because love built on fear always ends in war. Comment, yes, if you'd believe them. Or no, if you'd start digging, like I did. Because in my world, digging is the only way I know how to breathe. Digging is the only way I know how to breathe. So I started digging. For days, I replayed everything Lena had ever said. Every smile that now felt rehearsed. She'd arrive late, leave early, carry folders she didn't show me, whisper calls she didn't explain. At first, I told myself it was stress. She'd been managing big accounts. Maybe she just needed space. But then, one night, I saw her car lights sweeping across the driveway long after midnight. I watched from the upstairs window, Holding my breath, she moved quickly, head down, a leather folder clutched tight to her chest. No phone, no hesitation, just purpose. And when her car turned out of the gate, something inside me twisted. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I knew I'd find something. The next day, I checked the office logs. Her keycard had been used again. 11:42 p.m., building entry. Why would she need to access the office that late, when no one else was there? My chest felt hollow as I drove downtown that evening, parking across the street from the Pierce Exports Tower. The lights on the top floor were still on, her floor. Through the tinted windows, I could see her silhouette pacing. Then, a second figure appeared. A man, tall, dark coat, neat hair, the kind of posture that screamed expensive secrets. He handed her something small. She looked down, nodded once, then reached for her bag. He touched her arm, gently, like a gesture meant to comfort or claim. And just like that, the night swallowed them both. The next morning, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even look at her the same way. She came into the kitchen, her tone calm as ever. "Good morning, Margaret." "Morning," I said, staring at the paper but not reading a word. She poured coffee, humming softly, some tune she always played when she was focused. To anyone else, she looked normal. To me, she looked like someone pretending too well. That's the cruel thing about suspicion. Once it begins, it paints everything in shadows. Later that afternoon, I was on my laptop, trying to work, when a notification blinked on the screen. A transfer alert. $80,000. Moved from one of our secondary accounts. Authorized, Lena Pierce. The floor seemed to drop from under me. I called Ethan immediately. "Your wife just moved $80,000 without a word. Mom, she's been handling payroll and vendor fees. At midnight? Through offshore sub-accounts?" He went quiet. "I'll ask her." "Don't ask," I said sharply. "Watch." That night, I did just that. The security footage showed her entering the office again. Alone, quiet, confident. Then, half an hour later, leaving with that same man, same briefcase, same look over her shoulder. I paused the video, zoomed in, heart pounding. There was something on the man's wrist, a silver watch, distinct, unfamiliar, the kind my husband used to wear when he met foreign clients. Old habit, a symbol of negotiation, of deals done in the dark. My mind connected threads that might not have even existed, but once suspicion finds rhythm, it becomes a song you can't unhear. 2 days later, Martha, the gardener's wife, came by with roses. She leaned in and whispered, "I probably shouldn't say this, but she's been seen downtown with someone." "Who?" I asked, my voice tighter than I wanted. "A man in a black car. They meet by the pier sometimes. I saw them last week." Her words sank in slow and heavy, like stones in water. By evening, I was driving to the pier. The sea mist clung to the windshield, as if the air itself wanted to hide something. Then I saw her car, parked near the edge, lights off, and there she was, Lena, leaning against the rail, the man beside her again, talking fast, hands moving. She pulled out that same envelope, brown, thick, sealed. He took it, nodded, and walked away. For a moment, she stayed there alone, staring out at the black water. And, for a fleeting second, I almost saw sadness. Not guilt, but the thought vanished as fast as the man did. The drive home felt endless. Every red light was a chance to reconsider. And I didn't. I convinced myself she was lying, that she was hiding more than money, a lover, a plan, A betrayal big enough to tear our family apart. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking too much to open the front door. Ethan was in the living room. "You're pale," he said. "Are you okay? Where's your wife?" "In bed. She's been exhausted lately." I almost laughed. Exhausted from what? Hiding millions? Sneaking around piers at night? I swallowed the words, but they burned on the way down. "Ethan," I said quietly, "are you sure she's who you think she is?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "People change. Love doesn't always mean loyalty." "Mom, please stop." That tone, half begging, half warning. It was the same tone he used the day his father died, when I told him to toughen up. I'd broken something in him back then, and maybe, without meaning to, I was about to break it again. Later that night, I heard voices from their room, muffled, tense. His tone low, hers sharp but trembling. A door slammed, then silence. I stood in the hallway, frozen, my reflection flickering in the mirror. A mother, a CEO, a woman who no longer knew what was real. The next morning, Lena came to me, her eyes red but her chin high. "I need a few days off," she said. "For what?" "Personal reasons." "Personal or professional? Does it matter?" I almost told her. I'd seen the pier, the man, the envelope. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her voice. Maybe it was fear. Fear that if I said it out loud, it would become true. "Just be careful," I said finally. "Always," she replied. And just like that, she walked out. For the next 48 hours, the house was silent. Ethan barely spoke. He kept glancing at his phone, typing messages he didn't send. When I asked, he said, "She just needs space." Space? That word again. It's what people say right before everything falls apart. On the third night, I went into her office. I told myself it was for inventory, but it wasn't. It was to find the truth. Inside, I found a locked drawer and a small photo of her and Ethan at the pier years ago, smiling in the wind. I almost felt guilty. Almost. Then I found another envelope, empty, but labeled with a bank name I didn't recognize. And my heart sank all over again. It was proof, I told myself. Proof of deceit. Proof of betrayal. But even as I whispered it, something inside me hesitated. Like the faint voice of conscience, trying to breathe under the weight of pride. That night, I stood by the window, watching the rain blur the city lights, and realized I was no longer looking for the truth. I was looking for confirmation, for anything that made my anger feel justified. Because once you start building a story of betrayal, every act of kindness looks like manipulation, and every silence sounds like guilt. Maybe that's how heartbreak begins. Not with lies, but with what you choose to believe about them. And by then, I had already chosen. If you're still watching, you already feel it. That quiet fear when something doesn't add up. Don't look away now. The truth is about to break open. Tap subscribe to stay through the ending of this story. And for more family drama stories guided by Orion Sage, where every heartbreak hides a lesson you didn't see coming. Hey, if you're still here, thank you. Seriously, thanks for spending your time on this story. There are a million things you could be doing right now, but you're here, walking through this with me. That means more than you think. If you're still watching, you already feel it, that quiet fear when something doesn't add up. Don't look away now. The truth is about to break open. Tap subscribe to stay through the ending of this story. And for more family drama stories guided by Orion Sage, where every heartbreak hides a lesson you didn't see coming. The night of Ethan's birthday was supposed to be warm, The house smelled of roasted duck, vanilla cake, and the faint sweetness of wine. Laughter filled the hall, polite and practiced, the kind that hides exhaustion behind perfect smiles. I'd spent the whole day pretending I didn't see the cracks, pretending my family wasn't collapsing in silence. Ethan's friends came, board members, neighbors, a few people from church. The chandelier sparkled like nothing in this house could ever fall apart. But I could feel it, that heaviness before thunder. Lena was late. When she finally walked in, the room shifted. She was wearing red, not bright red, deep, wine red. It clung to her like defiance. Her hair was pinned back, her lipstick soft, her eyes tired. In her hands, she carried a small white envelope. "Sorry, I'm late," she said, smiling faintly. "Work held me longer than I thought." Work? That word again. Always work. Always the easy cover for secrets. Dinner started. Conversations swirled around the table. Ethan talked about new contracts. Someone mentioned stock prices, and I sat there, watching her every move. She laughed at someone's joke, reached for her glass, and when her hand brushed Ethan's, I felt something twist inside me. Not jealousy, but grief. Grief for the son I used to know, who once told me everything, and for the family I no longer recognized. I lifted my wine glass. "A toast," I said, forcing a smile, "to my son, for his patience, his loyalty, and his ability to forgive." The words were knives wrapped in silk. Ethan smiled awkwardly. Lena looked down. Her fingers tightened around the fork. The room went quiet. Even the clock seemed to stop. "I'd also like to toast transparency," I continued, "because without it, trust is just a story we tell ourselves." I saw it, that flash in her eyes. Fear, guilt, maybe both. And something in me snapped. "Tell them, Lena," I said loudly. The kind of loud that doesn't come from volume, but from years of being obeyed. "Tell everyone where you've been spending your nights." A few gasps. Ethan froze. Lena blinked, stunned. "Margaret, don't Margaret me," I cut her off. $5.2 million moved. Late night meetings, the pier, the man in the black car. She paled, lips parting. "You followed me?" "I protected what's mine," I said coldly. "And what's my son's?" The guests shifted uneasily. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" "What's going on?" I said, voice rising. "Is that my daughter-in-law has been lying, stealing, meeting men behind my son's back." The room went silent, the kind of silence that crushes air out of your lungs. Ethan stood up. "Mom, stop. Stop! You should be the one asking questions," I shouted. "You're defending her while she bleeds your future dry." "Enough," he said, voice shaking. "You don't know what you're talking about." I turned to Lena. "Then go ahead, say it, deny it." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I can't." That single word echoed in my chest like a gunshot. You could feel the room tilt, the collective gasp, the judgment pouring down like acid rain. I slammed my glass down. "You can't?" "I told you, Margaret," she said softly. "You wouldn't understand." "Understand?" I snapped. "Understand what? Betrayal? Theft? Or adultery?" Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. That almost made me angrier, because tears would have meant guilt, but silence. Silence meant secrets. Ethan stepped between us. "Mom, please. Not here." "Then where?" I hissed. "After she drains the accounts? After she leaves you broke and humiliated?" I turned to the guests, forcing my voice steady. "Everyone here knows me. I don't make accusations without proof." I picked up my phone, opened the security footage, and held it up. The image flickered. Lena handing the envelope to the man by the pier. Gasps again. This, I said, voice trembling, is who she really is. Lena took a slow breath. Her face went pale. Her hands trembled, not with guilt, but with something else. You think you know everything, she whispered. But you don't. I pointed to the door. Get out, now. Margaret, Ethan's voice cracked. You too, if you defend her. He froze. Everyone did. I could hear my own heart pounding in the silence that followed. Rain began tapping against the windows, like the world itself was warning me to stop. But pride is deaf to warnings. You have 5 minutes, I said quietly, before I call the police. Lena didn't argue. She didn't scream or cry or beg. She just looked at Ethan and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she walked out. No coat, no umbrella, just the red dress under the silver rain. The door shut behind her, and the house seemed to sigh, as if it, too, was tired of holding its breath. Everyone left soon after. They didn't know what to say, and I didn't care. All I wanted was silence. All I wanted was proof that I was right. But when I looked at my son, I saw something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Heartbreak. You shouldn't have done that, he said quietly. You shouldn't have let her make a fool of you, I replied. You don't know what she's been doing, he said. Then tell me. I can't, he whispered. That word again. I can't. It followed me long after he went upstairs. I stayed in the living room long after the lights went out. The candles melted down to glass and wax. The air smelled like rain and regret. I poured myself a drink, but it didn't burn the way it used to. Maybe because the real fire was already gone. Through the window, I saw Lena's car parked by the curb. She was still there, sitting inside, engine off. For a moment, I almost went out, almost asked her why. But pride doesn't walk in the rain. It sits behind glass and calls itself righteous. The next morning, Ethan was gone, his suitcase missing, his phone off. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the rain outside. On the kitchen counter sat the envelope Lena had brought to the party. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Inside, a small card, blank, except for one line. And for Ethan, when he's ready. No apology, no explanation, just that. I almost tore it apart, but something in me, maybe guilt, maybe instinct, stopped me. Days passed. No calls, no texts. The house that once hosted dozens now echoed with one set of footsteps, mine. I spent those days searching for answers. In the company records, in her office, in every folder I could find. But the truth doesn't live in spreadsheets. It lives in the spaces between them. And those spaces were empty. One night, I sat by the fire with a glass of whiskey and my husband's old photo in my hand. You'd have hated this, I whispered. You'd have told me to calm down, to trust her. But you're not here, are you? So it's just me and my ghosts. The rain outside grew heavier, the kind that erases footsteps and mistakes. I thought about calling Lena. Then I thought about apologizing. Then I laughed, bitter. Apologize for what? For being right? But deep down, I didn't feel right. I felt empty, like a victory that didn't sound like winning. The next morning, the news headline hit like lightning. Pierce, exports under federal investigation. My breath caught. I scrolled. The report mentioned financial irregularities, false accounts, and a pending federal inquiry. One that had apparently begun weeks ago. And suddenly, those midnight meetings, those envelopes, those calls, they all looked different. The ground shifted under me. What if she wasn't hiding from us? What if she was protecting us? The thought was too heavy to hold, but it had already found its place inside me. That night, as I stood by the window again, watching the storm fade into a quiet drizzle, A voice message came through on my phone. Ethan, Mom, you need to stop looking at her like that. You don't know everything. I'll come by tomorrow. There's something you should see. His voice was calm, not angry, not broken, just tired, like a man who had walked through a truth too heavy to speak. I sat down slowly, and for the first time in weeks, I was the one who couldn't move. The day after Ethan's message, I didn't move much. It was one of those mornings where the air feels heavy, like even silence has weight. The house looked cleaner than it ever did, not because I cleaned it, but because I'd driven everyone out of it. I sat at my desk, staring at the phone, half hoping Lena would call to explain, half hoping she never would. Then, the screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years. Orion Sage. He had been my husband's mentor once. A friend. A voice of reason I used to respect, before I started mistaking power for wisdom. "Margaret," he said, when I picked up. "You sound tired." "I am," I admitted. "Everything's falling apart." "No," he said calmly. "Things are just showing you what they've always been." I laughed bitterly. "You always spoke in riddles, Orion Sage. I don't have the patience for them anymore." "You used to have patience for everything except yourself." His tone wasn't soft, but it wasn't harsh either. It was the tone of someone who'd seen too much of life to bother with drama. "So tell me," he continued, "why do you sound like someone who's already decided what the truth is, but hasn't checked if it's true?" The question stopped me cold. "Because I know what I saw," I said. "Do you?" he asked. "Or do you know what you felt?" I didn't answer. He didn't fill the silence. He let it breathe, like he knew that most truths only arrive in quiet. "Let me tell you something," he said. "When people are hurt, they don't look for the truth. They look for comfort. And nothing comforts the heart faster than a story where you're right." He paused. "But being right doesn't mean you've seen clearly. Sometimes, being right just means you've stopped listening." I pressed my forehead into my palm. "You're saying I'm wrong?" "I'm saying you haven't checked yet." I looked out the window. The rain had slowed, but the world still looked blurred, like even the sky was unsure. "Margaret," he said softly, "you've built your life on control. That's not a flaw, it's a skill. But control has one weakness. It doesn't know how to pause." He told me a story then. "A woman once thought her neighbor had stolen her wedding ring," he began. "She searched his yard, called the police, accused him in front of everyone. 2 days later, she found the ring in her own laundry basket. She never wore it again. Not because she lost it, but because every time she looked at it, she saw who she'd become when she didn't know the full story." He let the words hang there. "You can destroy something true," he said, "just because you couldn't stand waiting to find out if it was false." I swallowed hard. "You think I should just sit here and do nothing?" "No," he said. "Sit here and see. That's different." "What does that even mean?" "It means stop looking for evidence that you were right. Start looking for clues that you might have missed." He paused, voice lower now, slower. "People make 2 mistakes when they're hurt. They talk too fast and they think too soon. You've already done both." He was right. Every argument, every accusation. It was me trying to stop the pain by proving it belonged to someone else. "So what do I do now?" I asked quietly. "Do what truth asks from everyone," he said. "Be calm enough to notice, brave enough to question, and patient enough to let time explain what anger never could." He hesitated, then added, "You don't need to forgive anyone yet, Margaret. You just need to make sure you're not fighting ghosts that look like people." I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not guilt, just stillness. The kind of stillness that feels like standing at the edge of a storm, knowing the thunder hasn't spoken its last word. We talked for a while longer, but most of what he said after that wasn't advice. It was presence. And maybe that's what wisdom really is. Someone who doesn't fix you, just reminds you to stop breaking yourself. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. The world outside was gray, but for the first time, it wasn't threatening. It was quiet. I didn't know if I was wrong, but for the first time, I wanted to know. That evening, I went to the office alone. The place smelled like dust and rain-soaked concrete. Every light flickered. The building felt tired, like it had witnessed too many arguments. I sat down at my desk, opened the company files again, and this time I didn't scroll fast. I just looked, line by line. Transaction dates, emails, notes written in Lena's handwriting. Nothing made sense yet, but for the first time, I wasn't reading to accuse. I was reading to understand, and maybe that's where truth always starts. Not in answers, but in quieter questions. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It didn't pour anymore. It just lingered, like the world was holding its breath. I was standing at the kitchen counter when the knock came. Not the soft kind, the kind that sounds like authority. 2 men in dark suits stood at my door. Badges, cold faces, a storm I hadn't seen coming. Mrs. Pierce? Yes? We're with the Federal Financial Task Force. We need to ask you about a $5.2 million transfer from Pierce Export's reserve account. The words hit harder than thunder. That's my company, I said slowly. But I didn't move that money. One of them flipped open a folder. My name was right there, in black ink, printed above a digital authorization ID. The transfer was executed with your credentials. You're not under arrest, but you are required to appear for questioning this afternoon. The paper trembled in my hands. The ink almost looked like it was bleeding. When I turned, Orion Sage was already there. He'd been sitting in the living room, reading one of my late husband's old law journals, as if he had known this moment would arrive. He rose calmly, set the book down, and said only, "Don't defend yet. Listen first." At the task force building, everything smelled like cold air and coffee. A female agent led me through the corridor and into a small, glass-walled conference room. She offered water. I didn't take it. Through the glass, I could see another room, one with a familiar silhouette. Lena, her hair tied back, face pale but composed. For a second, my anger came rushing back, raw and stupid. But then, Orion Sage's voice echoed in my head. "Don't defend yet." The agent began her questions. "Mrs. Pierce, were you aware of the movement of $5.2 million on May 12? No. Was anyone authorized to use your audit login credentials? No one. I hesitated. Except maybe my daughter-in-law. She handled accounting reports. She wrote something down. So you're confirming Mrs. Lena Pierce had access? For reports, not transfers." The agent turned the folder toward me. On the page was a digital token authorization. It was mine, but the timestamp placed it at 11:47 p.m. That was the night I'd heard her car leaving the driveway. My voice came out low, flat. She did it. But then the agent said something that made my stomach twist. "Actually, Mrs. Pierce, Mrs. Lena Pierce reported this transfer to us." I froze. What? She called the Financial Task Force hotline at 7:02 a.m. the next morning. Said she suspected a breach in the company's reserve account. They moved me to an observation room. On the other side of the glass, Lena sat with 2 agents and a lawyer. I couldn't hear their words, but the way her hands moved, calm, deliberate, told me this wasn't a panicked woman. Orion Sage stood beside me, hands folded behind his back. "Do you still believe she betrayed you?" he asked quietly. "She moved the money. Maybe she did. Maybe she stopped someone else from moving it." An agent entered the observation room, holding a new file. He placed it in front of the lead investigator. Even from here, I saw the heading, "Escrow Federal Hold. Protective Transfer Order." I blinked. What is that? It's what happens when funds are moved into a federal escrow account, Orion Sage said softly. They're frozen under protection, not stolen. I stared. You mean? I mean she didn't take the money, he said. She saved it. My knees nearly gave out. I had spent weeks cursing her name, and she'd been protecting everything I'd built. Before I could speak, another agent rushed in with a printed document. He whispered something to the lead investigator, who frowned. What is it? I asked. A secondary transfer, the agent replied. $200,000, wired out of the escrow last Friday. The room went silent. To where? We're tracing it now. It was moved to a private account under an alias, initials, MP. My initials. That's not me, I whispered. We know, the agent said. But whoever did it used an older digital certificate linked to your former audit key. We're trying to locate the source. The floor tilted. 2 steps forward, and the world had twisted again. Across the glass, I saw Lena's face when they told her about the second transfer. Her calm broke for the first time. She looked at the papers, and then at me. It wasn't accusation. It was disbelief, like she was realizing that both of us were drowning in the same storm. They ended the interview after that. No arrests, just more questions. But as Lena stood to leave, one of the agents stopped her. Mrs. Pierce, we'll need you to remain available for further inquiry. That's bureau talk for, you're not free, but we're not ready to charge you. Lena nodded silently. When she stepped into the hall, our eyes met again through the glass. For the first time, I saw it. Not guilt, not fear, but exhaustion. The kind you get when you've been telling the truth, and no one believes you. Orion Sage and I left the building in silence. The sun was setting behind the glass towers, gold smeared into gray. We stood by my car, the air cold enough to sting. Tell me this, Orion Sage, I said. If she didn't take the money, why is there still $200,000 missing? He looked up at the sky for a long time before answering. Because truth doesn't come clean, he said finally. It bleeds, first. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The image of her face through that glass kept replaying. The way her eyes had widened at the new accusation. It didn't look like guilt. It looked like betrayal turned backward. I poured myself coffee and sat by the window. The rain had started again, soft and deliberate. Ethan came home close to midnight. His eyes were tired, his tie undone. He didn't even take off his coat. You saw the hearing? I did. Then you know now, he said. She wasn't stealing. I know part of it, I said. But there's more. What do you mean? I told him about the second transfer, the $350,000. His face went pale. That's impossible. She told me everything. Then maybe she didn't tell you enough. He stepped back, shaking his head. Mom, she wouldn't. Ethan, look at me. I've been wrong before, but something's off. He sat down heavily. What do you think it means? It means someone else is moving the pieces. And until we know who, everyone looks guilty. Later that night, I heard a car door outside. Through the rain, headlights flashed once, twice, then off. I pulled the curtain aside. Lena's car. She was standing by the gate, holding a folder. She looked up at the window, met my eyes, and then turned away. I ran to the porch, opened the door, but by the time I got there, she was gone. On the step lay the folder, soaked halfway through by rain. I picked it up, brought it inside. Inside were copies of bank statements and a handwritten note. They think it's over. It isn't. Please, don't say anything yet. They're watching. The ink had bled, but I could still read every word. My hand shook so badly, I almost dropped it. Orion Sage, I whispered into the dark. What does this mean? And though he wasn't there, I could almost hear his voice in my head. You wanted truth, Margaret. Now it's walking toward you. And it's not coming alone. The next morning, I drove to Orion Sage's place. He opened the door before I knocked. You have the folder, he said. How did you? Because I told you. Truth walks. You just have to follow the footprints. I handed him the note. He read it quietly, then looked at me. The second transfer might not be what it seems. Someone's trying to build a narrative to make sure when this ends, both of you look dirty enough that no one asks deeper questions. Who would do that? Whoever still has something to lose, he said. He looked out the window, thoughtful. There's a phrase we used to say in courtrooms, he murmured. The first truth is rarely the last one standing. I swallowed hard. What should I do? Do nothing in anger, nothing in pride. Wait, the truth is bleeding its way home. That night, a news alert flashed on my phone. Former Pierce partner, under investigation for corporate embezzlement. Evidence tied to missing $350,000. My heart nearly stopped. Harkins, his name again. The report said the Bureau had discovered an unauthorized mirror account opened under his shell corporation and traced to the second transfer. But the article ended abruptly. Details remain under federal seal. So Lena was right, but I still didn't understand everything. Like why she hadn't told Ethan, or me, or anyone. At 2 a.m., I stood by the window again. The rain had stopped. The world smelled like metal and forgiveness. I thought of her note. They're watching. Maybe it wasn't paranoia. Maybe it was warning. I didn't know who they were. But I knew one thing. I wasn't done. Because this time, I wasn't chasing justice. I was following truth. By the time the rain stopped, the house felt like it had aged years. Every echo had a memory in it. Of arguments. Of slammed doors. Of words I wish I could pull back. The news broke first thing in the morning. Federal task force confirms former partner William Harkins as prime suspect in embezzlement case. Funds traced from the missing $350,000 to a shell account he controlled. I stood there in my robe, watching the headline scroll across the bottom of the TV screen. The words barely registered. The $5.2 million was safe in federal escrow. The $350,000 was recovered from Harkins's mirror account. The investigation was officially closed. And still, the house was quiet. Too quiet. That afternoon, a soft knock came at the door. When I opened it, Lena was standing there. She looked thinner, worn. Her hair was tied back the same way as that morning at the task force office. In her hands was a folder, wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve. They said you should have the final audit copy, she said. I thought it was only right that it came from me. For a moment, I didn't move. Then I stepped aside and let her in. The air between us wasn't cold anymore. It was just tired, like two people who had survived the same storm, but on different boats. We sat at the table where everything had fallen apart. I poured her tea. Jasmine, the kind she liked. The steam curled between us like a bridge made of breath. You didn't owe me this visit, I said. I did, she replied. Because I was the one who watched you break and couldn't tell you why. And now it's over. She smiled faintly. Mostly. I opened the folder. Inside was the confirmation from the task force. Escrow funds fully released. Investigation concluded. Subject exonerated. I stared at the line for a long time. Somewhere between relief and regret, something unclenched. You kept the roof from falling, I said quietly, and I kept trying to build walls. She laughed once, a sound halfway between joy and disbelief. Maybe that's what families do, she said. Break each other's walls until there's finally a door. I looked up, and for the first time in months, I saw the girl Ethan had fallen in love with. The girl who'd wanted to help, not to win. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She shook her head. "No, you were scared. So was I. I just hid it better." When Ethan came home that evening, we didn't make speeches. He kissed Lena on the forehead, kissed me on the cheek, and sat down like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. The three of us ate dinner in silence. But it was a good silence, a clean one. No accusations hiding under it this time. Halfway through the meal, Ethan looked up and said, "I think Dad would have liked to see this." And for the first time, none of us cried. Later, when the dishes were done, I found Orion Sage sitting on the porch swing. He hadn't knocked or called. He never did. He just arrived when the air finally cleared. The sun was setting over the pines, light catching on the wet leaves. I sat beside him. He handed me a cup of black coffee. "You already know," he said. "They cleared her," I replied. "Yes. Then why do I still feel like I lost something?" He smiled. "Because truth doesn't return everything it took. It just gives you back enough to keep going." I stared at the sky, the orange bleeding into gray. "I spent so much time trying to control everything," I said. "I thought, if I held tight enough, nothing could fall apart. Control is the polite word we use for fear," he said gently. "It makes you feel safe, but it also makes you blind." He paused, then leaned forward. "You remind me of a farmer I once knew," he began. He kept watering his field every day because the surface looked dry, but beneath, the soil was already soaked. The crops began to rot, not from neglect, but from too much care. He didn't trust the rain to do its job. "And I didn't trust anyone to do theirs," I said softly. "Exactly," he replied. "Love isn't proven by control, Margaret. It's proven by the space you give others to act with integrity, even when you're terrified." The breeze shifted. The smell of wet pine and salt drifted through the porch. He let the silence hang long enough for the thought to sink in. "So what do I do now?" I asked. "You start small. You stop defending your pain. You thank the people who stayed." The next morning, I did exactly that. I found Lena on the back porch, pruning the hydrangeas. I handed her a fresh mug of coffee and said, "Thank you for staying." She smiled. "You don't have to thank me." "I do," I said, "because you didn't have to come back." She looked down at the flowers. "Maybe I didn't, but I wanted to." Later that week, I received a letter from the task force. Formal, typed, impersonal. But tucked inside was a handwritten note from Agent Ramirez. "Sometimes the hardest thing is proving someone innocent who already thinks they're guilty." I folded the letter and placed it beside my husband's photo. He'd always said truth would come. I just never thought it would take this much noise to arrive. That night, I sat outside again with Orion Sage. He didn't say much at first, just watched the sky until the last light slipped behind the trees. Then he spoke, low and calm. "Every family drama story hides the same storm, the fear of losing what we love. Some fight louder, some hide behind silence. But truth doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the one still willing to listen when the shouting ends." He turned toward me. "You listened, and that's why you found it." "I nearly lost everything first," I said. "Sometimes that's the price of wisdom. If you're still here, thank you. You just spent part of your life listening to mine, and that's something I'll never take lightly." These stories, they're not about perfect families. They're about the messy ones that keep trying. So thank you for staying through the storm. If you'd like to walk through more family drama stories guided by Orion Sage, tap subscribe and stay with us for the next one. Because somewhere out there, someone's truth is still trying to find its way home.